All right, fantasy players. First half is officially over. We get a nice little break here. Watch some All-Star festivities and prepare for the second half. I've already recapped what's happened so far by going over my fantasy All-Stars on the recent live stream, and now we got to look at the flip side too. Let's take a look at who were the biggest busts, the all bust team, if you will, so far for 2025. More importantly, you have these guys. What do you actually do with them? We're going to go around the horn and let's start right now behind the plate at catcher. And you know what? It's easy to pick one of any of the top catchers that were drafted because really anyone not named Cal Raleigh, who was drafted somewhat early in fantasy drafts, has been a bust. But I think we got to go with a guy who was drafted first because if you spent a third, fourth round pick on William Contreras, you're left with a lot of nothing. All right, nothing is harsh. Maybe that's not exactly accurate, but man, you expected a guy who was going to be giving you a big advantage at the position. And look, I get it. Salvador Perez hadn't done a whole lot, but at least now his RBI total is getting healthy, and I really think he'll turn it around. As I've said, Adley Rushman, we'll see. I mean, he's got to get off the IL, and I still have some hope for him. Yair Diaz, after his first couple of really bad weeks, has been at least decent, startable, and that leaves Contreras for me, again, William Contreras, not only is the biggest disappointment at the catcher position, but one of the biggest early round draft busts. You thought you were getting a nice high batting average at catcher? Think again. Think you're getting at least double digit home runs, fair amount of power? No. 6 home runs, not offsetting that with a high RBI total either. Now he's slightly more valuable in a points format, depending on, what your league scoring is. According to CBS, their scoring system, he's the 5th ranked catcher. But again, let me remind you, he was drafted as the first catcher, and there's not a big gap between him and the guys behind him. And that's the problem, is negative value based on where you took him and your expectations. And then you talk about a roto league, again, hardly any power. The batting average is no good. He's barely even a top 10 catcher in roto leagues. And moreover, we're going to keep seeing this a big course correction next year in terms of draft strategy. Some people went early catcher this year, and they are hating it and regretting it, especially with all the great catchers that are available on the waiver wire. Great might be overstating it, but still, look at a guy like Augustin Ramirez, who you could have plucked off of waivers right after he got called up from the minors. He's more than twice as many home runs as William Contreras, and his batting average is like the same. So there's no doubt William Contreras has been a bust, but I can't say that you should drop him. Obviously, you can't sell here because there's not anybody who should be interested. I think just hold and chalk it up at a loss at the position. If you want to mix and match with another catcher off waivers, I think that's fine. But even though I don't expect him to be remarkably better in the second half, he's at least adequate. All right, first base. I will say this was a little bit tougher. Now, there are those in the endgame community, maybe a certain co host, who would strongly recommend Freddie Freeman to be the biggest bust because he's done not Freddie Freeman like things lately. I find this hard to believe. Double check this. 1 home run since May 11th. It's been about 2 months since he's gone deep more than once, and he's hitting 188 over the past month. And he's not the only Dodger we're going to talk about, but I will say he's not the one I'm really worried about. I can't put Freeman as a bust because his batting average is still near 300, and plus the RBI and run totals are pretty good. I'm not too worried about Freeman. A lot of first basemen here haven't really let down. I think the one I am going to call a bust is Christian Walker of Houston. Some people thought this would be an upgrade going to Houston for him. It hasn't been. This whole Astros offense has been kind of inconsistent. Having Jordan Alvarez gone for most of the season hasn't helped. But look, Walker has struggled just from the jump here since he got to Houston. He's got 12 homers, 47 RBIs. That's not terrible, but when batting average is low, we haven't had really many booms. I mean, he's not helping you on a weekly basis. I know if you're in a weekly league, each week you feel like you're struggling to get anything from him. As far as the second half goes, I'm a little concerned here that this might be something we chalk up to just an aging slugger, not in a great situation anymore. It should be, but it doesn't look like it is. So I'm not really expecting anything much different. I don't feel like you even have to hold him in a 12-team league. All right, second base, this is a little easier. Now, for most of the season, Marcus Semien was firmly in the lead for biggest bust at second base, but he has been passed by Ozzy Albies. We had a lot of questions about Albies lately, and I've just finally come around to accepting the fact that he's just stinking this year. I'm trying to find something, trying to point to something that might show that there's a course correction here, maybe some underlying metrics, I can't. There's nothing here. It is all bad basically. And you got to worry for a guy who really isn't known for power. He's managed to kind of eke out decent power numbers at the Keystone, but no, this year he just looks like a slap hitter who isn't getting the breaks. And you know what? He's getting the breaks on the base paths because he's not stealing bases either. And Albies isn't the only Brave I'll talk about. Clearly, one of the more disappointing offenses this year in fantasy. But look, a 220 batting average, 7 homers, and 7 steals. Let me list off some second basemen that you could still pluck off of waivers that not only have as many or more homers and steals combined, but also aren't dragging your batting average down. Luis Garcia Jr., who doesn't even play every day for Washington, Zach McKinstry, who plays a different position every day, Otto Lopez of the Marlins, Willie Castro, utility guy. Yeah, all of those guys have better power and speed numbers than Ozzy Albies and better batting averages, and they're just sitting out there on waivers. So why isn't Albies out there? I think it's time. I'm going to do it. Cut the cord. You can drop Albies. Don't look back. Now, at third base, also kind of pleasantly surprised to find out there weren't too many guys I consider huge busts at the position. I think it got a little easier to call Josh Young of the Rangers a bust now because he's been demoted. Not that he's the only Ranger who's been bust this year, but at that position, I mean, Jake Berger could qualify there too, but at least he got called back up. Yeah, Young is the guy I had high hopes for. I mean, still super talented. Really, the only question with him was could he stay healthy? So many injuries. He's been out there basically all year and just not producing. This is kind of a team wide thing, like an epidemic. It's just kind of invaded all of them. Just mediocre power numbers, a low batting average, a terrible offense. And look, maybe in your dynasty leagues, you want to hold on to him for next year. Everywhere else, just don't bother. Now, here's the tough one, the shocking one. I think it's finally time to just get ahead of this and address what is going on with Mookie Betts. And shortstop, I don't need to remind you, is the deepest position now offensively. So many good options, and Mookie Betts looks like one of the worst of them. Not just bad, but worse and getting worse. His rolling ex-Woba is taking a nosedive as we head to the end of the first half. Now, a lot of people want to point to the illness, the virus he had before the season started, the very beginning, where instead of putting him in the IL and letting him rest, they just put him back out there. They say he lost like 20 pounds, all this muscle, hasn't got his strength back. Maybe that's it. I mean, we're still now, in July? It's been a couple of months. Maybe he just hasn't had time to recuperate. I don't see a few days off just magically healing that if that is the case. But here's the other thing. If you look carefully, now again, we don't have a pronounced trend here because if so, we would have known this beforehand. But maybe he's losing a little bit of his power already because his average exit velocity, his barrel rate, they're the lowest since 2017. That's a long time ago for him. And his hard hit rate is the lowest ever. But if you look closely, he's had a long career. He's not that old, right? And he still had been performing pretty well, but there was a little bit of a dip last year, and now maybe is just becoming a trend. So could this just be a guy who's not able to hit the ball as hard as he used to be, compounded with the fact that he had that virus and everything just kind of conspiring to have one of his worst seasons since he was basically just breaking into the majors? I can't say I feel good about this one. You can't drop Mookie Betts. Okay, you just can't. I mean, look, there's certain players that I know the name, shouldn't dictate what you do. It's still Mookie Betts. I'm not dropping him, but man, I will sell for whatever I can get if possible. All right, now going to the outfield. This one is just as surprising. Jackson Merrill seems to be a young player on the rise and somehow taking a huge step back. He had a couple IL stints, one including a concussion. But when he first came off of the IL, he was red hot. In fact, that batting average was close to 400, and this was early in the season. This isn't injury related, I don't think at all. He's not showing any effects from concussion, injury, anything like that. I don't think this is anything physical that's limiting him or bothering him. I'm just going to come out and say, and I've said this before a couple of weeks ago, I think maybe overachieved a little bit last year, especially on that power. Those numbers were not looking good, but of course, he's got to tease us with this 2 homer game right before the All-Star break to make you think, oh, it's going to happen, right? He's going to all of a sudden surge again like he did last year. But let's address the steals or lack of. 1 steal on the entire season. No, he's just not even trying to steal. His 3 stolen base attempts all season, caught twice, successful once. So I'll say again, I can't drop Jackson Merrill. I wouldn't do that, but I'm still willing to sell high if somebody believes that there's a all-star kind of second half coming. And sure, I do think he'll do better than he has. I mean, this whole Padres offense, you think would rebound in some way. There's hope there, but if you're hoping for anything close to like a 2020 season, yeah, it's not happening. Now here's the next Brave, just an easy one. I don't even want to spend too much time talking about this because I've already said several times that you should cut Michael Harris the second, and he just keeps proving me right. Some metrics are better than others, but let's look at a really easy one Statcast has. It's called run value. It's basically a way to show how valuable you are as a hitter, and Michael Harris has a negative 28 run value, which is the worst in the entire major leagues. That tends to happen when you have a walk rate in the first percentile. Again, battling it out there with Michael Massey to be the worst, I don't think anything more needs to be said here. But also making an appearance on that dubious list is Brenton Doyle. I've taken a turn here as well. At one point, I thought earlier this season, maybe this is a buy low opportunity. Maybe it's just a slow start. Maybe not, because now I'm thinking about it. He got off to a really bad start in his rookie season. Maybe last year was the outlier. Now, again, it's too young to call him anything for his career, but this year looks a lot like it did before last year, and he's not a guy who you expected a high batting average from. Okay, fine. The power's taking a dip. He's not stealing bases because he's not getting on base. The Rockies are horrible. All told, man, I just don't know what to point to here to think, yeah, he's rebounding. He's been dropped in a lot of leagues. I think he needs to be dropped in more leagues. All right, now at pitcher, I mean, there's a whole lot of pitchers who could name that have disappointed you in some way or another, but let's talk about the ones who I think are the biggest bust relative to draft stock, expectations, etc. Now, I'm not talking about injured players a whole lot. I don't want to blame injury for lack of production. But this one I think we can excuse, even though Bailey Ober is on the IL heading into the break. That just happened about a week ago, and that is not the reason why he has been absolutely crushing your ratios. Ends the first half with a 5.28 ERA, a 1.41 whip, and I think the worst thing here is an 18.2% strikeout rate. That's a huge decline from last year, a 26.9% K rate. It's on the shelf right now for what they're calling a hip impingement. Nothing major, should be back right after the break. Sure, maybe this was nagging him the last couple of starts. You can't tell me it's been bothering him for 3 straight months and they just now did something about it. I'm willing to hold Ober since you can put him on the IL and keep him on the bench and wait and see if things get better. I'd just be ready to pull the plug if he doesn't look any better. Now on to Arizona. Well, I've been telling you to cut the cord on Zach Gallen since basically the beginning of the year. Didn't draft Gallen anywhere. Don't regret it. A 5.40 ERA, a 1.37 whip. His strikeout rate also down from last year. Not as much as Ober, but 22%. It's not going to cut it because that's not even quite league average. The big change for Gallen, his home run rate has more than doubled, right? His homers per 9 inning, 1.41, more than twice of last season. I know he also suckered some people into thinking he was going to bounce back after 2 good starts back to back and then once again was bad. I'm not buying into it. I'm not doing any more. I'm done with Gallen for 2025. And let's throw his rotation mate, Brandon Pfaadt, in there as well. Pfaadt's a guy who was drafted in most places, but kind of late. Maybe you didn't have high expectations for him, but you thought he would at least be in your rotation for most of the year. Maybe a chance that he would take a step forward. No. I'm putting him on this list because he basically is not worth rostering. I know in leagues where there are quality starts, like our Endgame league, he's not getting you those, and it's not like the Diamondbacks are winning as much these days either. I'm also not getting suckered by the fact that he just had an excellent start right before the break with 8 innings against the Padres. Yeah, the Padres have been one of the worst offenses over the past month. That was only the second time this season where he got more than 6 innings in a game. This is a guy who has always kind of lived on the edge here. His stuff is good, not great. Right now, he's just looking a little discombobulated. He hasn't shown any consistency. Last but not least, for my reliever, there's only one choice here. I mean, there's others, but this one was pretty easily Ryan Walker. Second straight year, yep, Giants closers have let us down. So last year when you drafted Duvall, you wind up wanting Walker, and this year it has been flipped. And as I've said before, there's nothing that makes Ryan Walker even worth rostering. His strikeout rate is way down from last year. His ratios are way up. I don't think he's even one of the best 5 pitchers in that Giants bullpen. And while early on it looked like guys like Devin Williams and Raisel Iglesias could have been the biggest bust for relievers, they've been redeemed, back to getting saves again. I don't think it'll happen with Walker because even when he's been given the chance again, he's blown it. All right, there you have it. Your all bust team for the first half of 2025. Act accordingly here. Make your moves over the All Star break. Stay active and don't forget to make those smart waiver wire pickups while everyone else is on break.